Have you ever loved someone so deeply that the very thought of them felt like home? What if you poured your heart into someone only to find that your love was met with silence? How do you heal when the person you love doesn't have the words to give back the love you gave them? My name is Olivia, and I've always been a hopeless romantic. Maybe it's because of the way I grew up, surrounded by love-filled stories from my parents. Or maybe it's the way I've always found solace in movies where love conquers all. Either way, love was something I believed in wholeheartedly. I never doubted it would come to me, it just had to. I just needed to find the right person, someone who would make all the heartache, all the waiting feel worthwhile. But life, as it tends to do, had other plans for me. I had been in relationships before, each one a chapter, each one a learning experience. Some ended amicably, others painfully, but all of them had one thing in common. They left me with more questions than answers. I began to wonder if love was something I'd never really understand. Was it about timing? Was it about fate? Was I missing something? I kept busy work, friends, the usual distractions. But the truth was, in the quiet moments, I felt it. The absence of the one thing I had always hoped for. The kind of love that felt like home. The kind of love that wrapped you up in its warmth and never let go. I was happy, or at least I tried to convince myself I was. Yet deep down, I wondered if I was meant to wait forever for something that would never come back then. One day it did. I met Max at a friend's birthday party. It was one of those nights where everyone was talking, music was playing, and the usual social buzz filled the air. I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary to happen. I was simply there to support my friend and enjoy the evening. But then, as I was standing by the punch bowl, I saw him across the room. He wasn't like the others. While the crowd seemed loud and full of energy, Max stood in the corner observing, as if he was watching life rather than participating in it. There was a calm about him, a quiet intensity that drew me in. We didn't speak at first. I didn't even realize I was staring until I caught his gaze. He held it for a moment, longer than necessary, as though we were silently acknowledging something, but neither of us moved. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, nor was he being shy. It was just presence. There was something about him that felt different, something I couldn't explain. Eventually, he walked over. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, his voice smooth and low. "It seems like you're deep in thought." I laughed nervously, surprised that he'd even spoken to me. "Not really. Just trying to figure out how long I should stay before I pretend to be productive." Max smiled, a small, easy smile that made me feel like I wasn't just another person at a party. "Fair enough. You're probably right about the timing. But if you're going to escape, at least do it with a good drink." He gestured to the punch bowl. I smiled back, feeling a warmth that I couldn't explain. I guess I could use something strong to make it through the next hour. And just like that, the ice was broken. We found ourselves talking, not about anything particularly deep, just casual conversation, mutual friends, silly childhood memories, the weather. That with every word exchanged, it felt easier, like we were building a connection without even trying. It was different than anything I had experienced before. I felt seen when the night ended and I was about to leave. Max asked for my number. "I'd like to see you again," he said, his gaze sincere. "Maybe we can get to know each other more without the party distractions." I was taken aback by how natural it felt, as if we had already known each other for much longer than the hour we'd spent talking. Something in me stirred, and I realized I wanted to see him again too. We began texting soon after that night. Casual conversations at first, funny anecdotes, random questions about each other's day, suggestions for books and music we enjoyed. The more we talked, the more I felt like I was talking to someone I had known forever. Max was different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something about him felt right. He wasn't flashy or trying to impress anyone. He wasn't the life of the party, but he was certainly the kind of person who made everyone feel comfortable without saying much. When he spoke, it was as though every word had meaning, and I found myself listening more intently than I had ever done before. I found myself opening up to him more than I had with anyone in a long time. We shared stories of our past, the small failures, the little victories, the things that had shaped who we were. Max wasn't afraid to talk about his flaws or the things that scared him. He was vulnerable in a way I had never seen in a man before, and it made me want to be just as open with him. We started meeting more regularly, coffee dates turning into long walks, and long walks turning into evenings at local restaurants. But still, there was something unsaid, something I couldn't quite understand. The deeper we got, the more I realized that I was starting to care about him. A lot. And every time we were together, I felt it more clearly. This was different. This was the kind of connection I had been hoping for. It wasn't love yet, but it felt like it could be. The chemistry between us was undeniable, the way we seemed to fit together perfectly, like we had been made for each other. But I couldn't allow myself to believe it fully, not yet. And even though Max was open with me, I began to notice something else, something in his silence. At times, he would go quiet, his eyes clouding over, as if he was lost in thoughts he wasn't ready to share. I wanted to reach out to him, to ask what was going on inside his mind, but he never offered an explanation, and I was too afraid to ask. I couldn't deny it anymore. I was falling for Max. I could feel the pull every time we were together, every time he smiled at me, every time our hands brushed. It was undeniable, and yet the silence between us started to grow louder. I could feel him pulling away at times. Even though he was still physically present, he would get quiet, distracted, like something was on his mind. And I wondered if it was me, if I was asking too much, or if my expectations were getting too high. I wanted to ask him about it, but the truth was, I was scared. Scared of what he might say. Scared that he wasn't as into this as I was. The silence wasn't just in his words. It was in the spaces between our conversations. It was in the way he would avoid looking at me when I asked him about his feelings. It was in the way he'd pull away just a little when I reached for him. And with every passing day, the silence became more deafening. I wanted to ask him what was going on, but I was too afraid to hear the answer. What if this was just a fleeting moment for him, something he wasn't ready to commit to? What if the connection I felt wasn't as strong for him? After our last conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between Max and me. In the beginning, everything had felt so easy. We shared everything, our hopes, our dreams, our small insecurities. But now there was a quiet tension building between us that neither of us seemed to acknowledge. It wasn't like he'd suddenly become cold, but the distance was unmistakable. He was still there physically, but it was like something was missing. I could feel it every time we met, those moments of silence that would stretch a little too long. I would say something, and instead of the usual banter or thoughtful response, he would just nod, smile slightly, and change the subject. It wasn't that he wasn't present, but it felt like a part of him had pulled back, and it was slowly driving a wedge between us. The late-night phone calls that used to last. Hours began to fade to a few minutes of small talk. Texts, once filled with excitement and sweet words, became short and perfunctory. How was your day? Or, I'm tired. Talk to you later. I couldn't help but wonder if I was overreacting. But the absence of his words started to feel like a ghost lingering between us, unspoken, but there. I spent my nights lying awake, staring at my phone, wondering if he was doing the same or if I was the only one still invested in the bond we had built. I told myself not to make a big deal out of it. After all, life got busy. He had work. I had my responsibilities. But every time I reached out, the conversation seemed to get shorter. I asked him if something was wrong, but he'd always brush it off with, "It's just been a rough week." He never went into detail, and I couldn't help but wonder why. What was he hiding? Or was it that he no longer wanted to share his life with me? One evening, as we were walking together after dinner, the air was thick with unspoken words. We were supposed to be enjoying each other's company, but the tension was unbearable. I couldn't stand it anymore. "Max," I said, my voice tentative, "what's going on?" "You've been different lately. I don't know what's happening, but I can feel you pulling away." He looked at me, a flicker of surprise crossing his face, but he didn't say anything for a long moment. His lips parted as if he was going to say something, but then they closed, and he sighed heavily. "I don't know what you want me to say, Olivia," he finally said. "I'm just not sure about everything anymore." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. It felt like I had been waiting for him to say something, anything, but this wasn't what I had expected. "Not sure about what?" I asked, my voice tight with frustration, and heard Max paused. His hands stuffed deep into his pockets, his face clouded with indecision. "I'm not sure about us, Olivia. I care about you." "I do, but things feel off, and I can't explain it. I've been feeling distant. I think it's best if I just take a step back for a while." The words were out there now, hanging in the air between us like heavy fog. I couldn't process what he was saying. Was he breaking up with me? Was he pulling away because he had lost interest? Or was there something else at play, something deeper and more complicated than I could understand? I tried to hold it together, but the pain in my chest was unbearable. "So what, we're just going to pretend this isn't happening? You're just going to leave me hanging?" My voice cracked as I spoke, and I could feel the heat of tears welling up in my eyes. Max's face softened, and he reached out to touch my arm. "No, I'm not leaving you, Olivia. But I can't keep pretending everything is okay when it's not. I'm just confused, okay? I need space." The word stung. I had given him everything, my trust, my heart, my time, and now he was asking for space, but I didn't want to give him that space. I wanted to fix things. I wanted to reach into his soul and pull out whatever was causing him to feel this way. "I don't want space." "Max," I said, my voice shaking, "I want you to talk to me. I want to understand why you're pulling away. Why is everything changing?" But instead of offering the answers I desperately wanted, he just looked at me with those sad eyes, as if he were apologizing without saying the words. "I don't know if I can explain it, Olivia. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just need time to think." The uncertainty lingers. The next few days were the hardest I had ever experienced in our relationship. I tried to give Max the space he asked for, but every moment felt like a step farther away from what we once shared. Every time I saw his name on my phone, I felt this overwhelming mixture of hope and fear. Would he finally open up to me? Would I get the answers I had been waiting for? But he didn't. The texts remained brief. The calls remained distant. He stopped coming to the places we used to frequent together. When I asked him to meet up, he would politely decline, citing his work schedule. I could feel the silence suffocating me, and I wondered if it was a silence of finality. I spent so many nights thinking about the way he looked at me when he said, "I need space." How had we gone from deep conversations, shared laughter, and late night talks to this coldness? Had he ever truly cared about me, or had I been fooling myself all along? I wanted to believe that he was just going through something personal, that this wasn't the end of us. But as the silence stretched on, I couldn't shake the feeling that Max had already made up his mind, and I was left trying to piece together the fragments of a relationship that seemed to have unraveled in an instant. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily the silence had slipped in. We had gone from being two people completely open with each other to two strangers passing in. The night, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a breakup. It was just a quiet drift, like a boat slowly drifting away from shore without either person noticing until it was too far to reach. The uncertainty in my heart only grew with each unanswered text, and I wondered if this was it. If the love we shared had faded into something less tangible, something irreparable. But the worst part was that I didn't have the words to ask him to come back. The silence between us had become so loud that I was terrified of shattering it with a conversation that might push him further away. And so I waited, and I waited for him to come to me, for him to realize what we had, for him to break the silence. But as each day passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence was all I was going to get. The days after Max's request for space dragged on, and the silence grew more deafening. I spent my days lost in a haze of confusion, unsure of how to bridge the distance between us. I told myself I was being patient, that he just needed time. But with each passing day, the waiting became unbearable. I missed him more than I had ever admitted to myself. His absence filled every corner of my mind and heart. One evening, after nearly a week of silence, I couldn't take it any longer. I had tried to give him the space he had asked for, but I realized I wasn't living in the in-between anymore. I couldn't keep holding my breath, waiting for something to happen, for him to come back to me. I needed answers. I sent him a text. "Can we talk? I can't keep doing this." Almost immediately, my phone buzzed with a reply. "Can I meet you in an hour?" My heart pounded in my chest as I read the message. This was it. This was the moment that could either bring us back together or confirm my worst fears. I quickly got ready, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. What was he going to say? What had he been thinking during all this time apart? When I arrived at the cafe, I spotted Max right away. He was sitting at the same corner table we used to sit at, the one where we had shared so many quiet moments, our faces lit by the soft glow of the streetlights outside. He looked the same tired, but still undeniably handsome. But there was a heaviness to his posture, a weight in his eyes that told me he had been carrying something for a while. He stood as I walked in, his expression serious but soft. "Hey," he said, his voice low. "I'm glad you came." I sat down across from him, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. The silence between us felt like it was hanging on a thread, and I knew I couldn't wait any longer. "Max, I need you to tell me what's going on. I can't keep guessing what you're thinking. What are we doing? Are we even still?" "Yus?" My voice cracked at the last word, and I could feel the tension in my chest as I waited for his response. He looked away for a moment, his eyes focused on the cup in front of him, before meeting my gaze again. There was an undeniable sadness in his eyes, but there was also something else, something raw, something real. "I didn't want to hurt you, Olivia," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "But I've been struggling with myself, with where I'm going in life. I've been holding back from you because I couldn't be the person I wanted to be for you. I kept pushing you away because I was scared. Scared of failing, scared of letting you down." I listened, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to process his words. Was this it? Was this the explanation I had been waiting for? I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep going, keep pretending I wasn't hurting inside. But every time I saw you, I felt like I was letting you down, like I wasn't. giving you the love you deserved. And I didn't know how to fix it, so I did what I always do. I shut down. I pulled away. The weight of his words hit me like a wave. Max hadn't just been pulling away from me, he had been fighting his own internal battle. He had been struggling with himself, with his fears, and I had been left in the dark, unable to see the full picture. But as his words sank in, I realized something. I wasn't the only one who had been hurt. We had both been affected by the silence. The emotional distance had come from both of us, even if I hadn't fully understood it at the time. "I've been unfair to you, Olivia," Max continued, his voice cracking slightly. "I know I can't change the past, but I want to be honest with you now. I care about you more than I've let on. But I don't know if I can give you what you need. Not right now. Not until I figure things out on my own." The silence that followed was thick with both relief and sadness. He had opened up to me in a way I had never expected, but it wasn't the answer I had hoped for. Max didn't want to let me go, but he couldn't be the man I needed him to be. He was still lost in his own world of uncertainty, still searching for something within himself that he couldn't yet find. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had hoped he would tell me that he wanted to make things work, that he could overcome his struggles and be the partner I needed. But he couldn't promise me that. He couldn't give me the certainty I had been yearning for. "I get it," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the pain that churned inside me. "I've been so caught up in what I wanted and what I thought we were that I never considered what you were going through. I never asked you what you needed, and I'm sorry for that." Max's eyes softened, his hand reaching across the table to gently hold mine. "I never wanted to hurt you, Olivia. You mean so much to me. But I think I think we both need to take a step back. I need to figure things out on my own, and you deserve someone who can give you everything you need. I can't do that, right?" Now, the conversation lingered in the air, unspoken but understood. It was the kind of goodbye that wasn't marked by dramatic tears or angry words. It was the kind of goodbye that happened quietly, in the spaces between words, in the painful realization that sometimes love isn't enough to keep two people together. Max stood up and pulled me into a hug, his arms wrapping around me tightly. I could feel his warmth, his breath against my neck, and for a moment, I wished I could freeze time and hold on to this moment forever. But I knew that this wasn't the moment for holding on. This was the moment for letting go. "I'll never forget you, Olivia," he whispered. "You've been a part of my life in a way that I'll always cherish." And with that, we pulled apart. We didn't say anything else. The silence between us wasn't painful anymore, it was peaceful, as though we had both said everything we needed to say without needing any more words. In the weeks that followed, I learned to accept what had happened. Max and I had shared something beautiful, something that I would always carry with me. But sometimes love isn't enough to make things work. Sometimes we have to let go of the people we love, not because we don't care, but because we both need to grow in different ways. I focused on healing. I spent time with friends, returned to my passions, and allowed myself to feel the sadness without letting it consume me. The heartbreak was real, but I knew that it wasn't the end of my story. It was just a chapter dot, and though Max and I had to part ways, I knew that love had taught me something important, that sometimes love turns to goodbye quietly, without a word of explanation, without any closure. And that's okay. Because in the end, even the silences between us are part of who we are.